Hello and welcome back to Molby On The Spot on Anfield and Next Pro. This is your, I'd like to say weekly, but we've been lax a bit recently. Sorry about that, folks. But it's your regular opportunity to catch up with the wit and wisdom of Jan Molby, the Liverpool and Denmark legend who you've all grown to love. And let's just not waste any more time and get straight to hearing the man's opinions about all things Liverpool. Jan, it's been too long. How are you doing, mate?
Yeah, it has been too long, Trevor, but, obviously unforeseen circumstances and whatever. I do believe that since we were last doing a podcast, I believe we beat Manchester United 7-0. But I think that's about the only bright spark. And as the viewers will see, I'm almost permanent now with glasses, which I'm not sure is a good sign either. There's worse things in the world, Trevor. There's worse things in the world.
Do you wear them around day to day? Because I don't. But for stuff like this, where I've got to look at screens, I just need them now. That's just it. But if you go down to shops, you're not wearing your glasses, right?
No, I don't. To be fair, I don't. But you're right. Situations like this, and obviously matches and things like that. I was when we were at Old Trafford last weekend when they played Everton, and I said to the guy I work with, I said, "Do you think we could both commentate the whole game without the glasses?" And he went, "No, I don't think we can anymore." So, yeah, it's another thing that creeps up on you, Trevor.
Comes to all of us, bud. Comes to all of us. Like you say, it's been a hell of a chunk. And we should just actually look at that run of fixtures for what it is. So 7-0 happens on the 5th of March. And then we know there's the break and all that kind of stuff. But 7-0 happens. The next time we run out is the 11th. And we get beaten by Bournemouth. Then there's a 1-0 Real match where, honestly, there wasn't a whole lot of hope going into that anyway. We then have a pretty bad reversal, 4-1 against City. That was a bit of a low point of the year for me. Just the attitude, especially in the second half, I thought it stunk. Chelsea was possibly one of the worst games of football I've seen in ages. And then we had the sort of schizo first half, shite second half, pretty excellent at times against Arsenal. To say that's a mixed bag would be doing mixed bags a bit of a service. It's awful, really, isn't it, man? When you think about it, like, it's a bunch of results. It's pretty dreadful.
Yeah, but I think the results are almost one thing, Trevor. I think if you dig deeper and you actually start to look at the performances, you look at the performance against Bournemouth. I know we missed a penalty and things could have been so different in it, but with the ease at which they created chances running straight through our back line, the City game, I was at the City game, and that second half, when did we last see something like that, Trevor? When did we last see something like that? And the best thing, if you think we're making that up, yeah, there's people watching this thinking, oh, well, it wasn't that bad. The best indication is the Liverpool fans behind that goal, yeah? With 15 minutes to go, I would suggest there's 500 left. Liverpool fans don't ever leave. They stay because they're proud of their team, they're proud of their football club, and we stick together, isn't it? But even they said, yeah, but he could. I mean, it was 4-1, but the gap was just. And then Craic pointed out the Chelsea game was just from another planet, wasn't it? You thought, what was that all about? And how that ever ended 0-0, I will absolutely never know. Having said all of that, I did enjoy the last one against Arsenal. It was a bit more, sort of, it's wild. Out of control from us, wasn't it? We just gave it everything that we had, didn't we? It's no good to suggesting that we turned the corner. I don't think we're at that stage. The next time we can talk about turning the corner is next season, isn't it? From now to the end of the season, a few games we've got left, it'll be up and down, it'll be east, it'll be west. We just have to put up with it.
And that corner turn is going to be up for grabs as well, depending on the amount of investment, right? So we're going to have to talk about that later on as well, because it's the only show in town really between now and the end of the year. But we'll fold in how you think or what you think is actually possible for this team to achieve. But before we do that, what we have to do is say up until half an hour of the Arsenal game, throughout most of the Chelsea game, against City, against Bournemouth, I wasn't really that impressed with what we did against Real Madrid, considering the occasion that it is and what was at stake. What I suppose what I'm getting at is there's a terrible attitude, stunk the place out. I mean, lack of effort on a scale it's hard to put right in your head when you think of the players that we're talking about. Now, you'd be like me. You're not going to go and start hacking the back off fellas who've been heroes. But there's something very askew. And I think it's too lazy, isn't it, to just put it down to exhaustion from consistently high performance and all that type of thing. I floated it out a few times on shows recently. I'd really like to get your take on this. I think the real issue, Jan, is they're psychologically bollocksed. I think you're performing to such a high level and it keeps getting snatched away from you. In the finest of margins, on so many occasions, you get to 2 Champions League finals, you lose them. You lose 2 leagues by a point against some sort of artificially inflated, let's just say, cheating machine. It must be hard on the spirit, man. I mean, can you relate to it from your own playing days? I don't really think you had rivals like City as such, but the heartbreak of just missing out. There was a lot of seasons where it was second rather than first for you guys.
Yeah, well, you're right. We were never in a position to point to one club. During my time, maybe a little bit towards the end, but generally we were the best and the biggest club. You know what I mean? So it wasn't as if you're thinking. It's a bit like every Liverpool player, every Liverpool fan knows that Manchester City, not a bigger club, isn't it? But they got more tools to play the game with, isn't it? So it's very, very difficult, isn't it? It's a bit like a relationship going wrong, isn't it? So eventually you go, I can't do this anymore, you know. And I guess to a certain extent, that it hasn't happened to our football club, yeah, because our football club, you know, has been involved in too many of these, and the fans thrive on these things, isn't it? But I do think for a number of players, they've kind of almost thrown the towel in, not on purpose. It's just sometimes because you've got to do it physically and mentally, haven't you? You know, it's one doesn't go without the other, does it? You can, and I would suggest that our players physically as fit as they've been in the last 5 years, but mentally they probably aren't as fit as they've been. So, yeah, like into a relationship where in the end you hold your hands up and you go, I just can't do this anymore. It's just relentless. It's so hard work, isn't it? And they just keep going, isn't it? You know what I mean? So, yeah, there's probably been some damage done to our squad. That's something that we can't repair it. There's probably no way back for some of those players, and I think the club has probably reached the same sort of conclusion as we're doing now, Trev, that it's no good keep relying on these players, and it will return. It probably won't for some of them, not for all of them, but for some of them.
I'm trying to think about similar situations, and maybe again just to get sort of specific insight. Like you said, when you guys were really winning things so constantly, there was nobody to compare, and it was different foes at different times. Everton had what three-year run or something like that, maybe 4, where they were challenging. But it was different people. It wasn't that one sort of unstoppable force like City that just keep adding and adding and adding. And of course, this crowd as well, psychologically, have to look at other clubs now, like Newcastle and like Chelsea, particularly, even though they're massively underperforming, who can just throw the kitchen sink at it. Like the spend under Todd Bowley is ridiculous. So I'm trying to think maybe of an equivalent period where you guys were used to being top dogs, and then where that spell, I guess it coincides with the Graham Souness era, and the time up until when you're heading off for different pastures yourself, that the club started to have a different feel about it, in terms of, you know, there were emerging forces. Manchester United were coming into their own, and I wonder, did you have that kind of feeling then? I'm looking at lads like Virgil van Dijk, Andy Robertson, Trent Alexander-Arnold. I'm seeing them jogging back at times. It's just not a good picture, Jan. It's not the whole story. That's simplistic nonsense. But it's not a good picture. And I'm wondering, is that part of that sort of fuck it kind of thing that psychologically your head's gone a bit? And I wonder, did that happen a little bit in the Souness era that you remember? Because as a fan, it felt a bit like that. Whether it was or not in reality, I don't know.
Yeah, I think it did, Trev. I mean, I must stress again, yet again, It's not something that players do on purpose. I've never come across a footballer who goes out to play and not tries absolutely hardest. But for some reason, you continually running up against a brick wall, and that's what's happening. But I agree, it's not a good picture when we see our players not giving 100%, because we don't have many demands. The one demand we have is that everybody gives 100% in their own way. You know, some give 100% in a different way to others, isn't it? But we always give as much as we can, isn't it? So, but in terms of trying to compare it with the Sooners era, in Sooners era, we were nowhere near it, were we? You know, we didn't finish second or lost cup finals. So there was massive disappointment, but it was a different disappointment to this team, because this team was right in it. They were right in the mix. We knew we had no complaints in the season. We finished 4th, 5th, 6th, or whatever, and nobody ever went, "How did we finish here?" Because we finished where we deserved to finish. You know, and you probably can't quite say that. It's the one thing we always label at this team, isn't it? You know, probably didn't win enough trophies, which is a shame, isn't it? You know, but that's probably the one thing, isn't it? But there was no real excuses in our day. We just weren't good enough. But this team is good enough. They just you know ran up against a machine and a team full of players that, you know, we keep talking about squads doing each other, and I think it's more evident than ever, isn't it? You know what they've got sits to throw at every given situation. You just can't keep competing if you don't have the same tools, you know. And for a while we relied on our starting 11, and then it became almost 15 really, really good players, isn't it? But City's got 20 odd, haven't they? And it's just you just can't keep going toe to toe with something like that. Eventually they'll break you, and I guess that's probably what City have done, isn't it? You know, they probably broken the spirit of this team.
Yeah, and I think it's really important that you point that out about what players do or don't do. People are very quick to make personal digs and talk about attitude stinking and all the rest of it. And there's an assumption there that it's deliberately done, or that there's zero fucks given, as they say, and that's not the case. But I think we are talking about damaged goods. I think that's the conclusion we're coming to here. Now, we'll spend the last part of the show looking at what's left of the season and what you think can be made of it, if anything, looking at points, potential points totals, looking at opposition, talking about a few of those games. We'll focus obviously on the next game against Leeds, like we tend to do. But you mentioned earlier on, Jan, it's going to be about what can we do to reboot. And was it Tuesday evening? Today is Thursday when we're recording this. I think it was Tuesday evening, late-ish in the evening, when a whole big media dump happened about Jude Bellingham and how it looks like Liverpool are not willing to pay the price for Jude Bellingham. All the fellas you'd expect to throw the story out, the guys who tend to get things in the past, were all on it. And I want to, first of all, float this understandable fan reaction to you and see what you think of it. A lot of people are going, so we put plans on hold, basically almost wasted this season by not investing, because we were waiting for Jude Bellingham, was the story, right? And now we can't afford Jude Bellingham. And now people are doing all sorts of maths in their mind, saying, well, if he was going to cost this, we could get this and this and we'd be better off anyway. And that's all fine, but that seems like justification. What's your take on, has there been a strategy here? Is it a little bit more or less complicated than people are making out? What do you reckon?
I think it's really difficult. You know, I think it's easy to get involved in 4 or 5 different scenarios. I mean, my first issue with it is, Trevor, have we somehow engineered a very public loss in terms of trying to sign Jude Bellingham? That's how it looks to me.
Yeah.
Now, what would the club's interest be in that? I really don't know. Because I almost feel like we've engineered a public loss in something that, were we ever really in it? You know, when it comes to it, and it's going to be 130 million, and it's going to be £500,000 a week, were we really in it? So I don't know what we get from doing that. Some people are saying we're still very much in it. I don't think we are. I don't think this is a negotiation tool, and we're trying to step back. I think we probably put some feelers out, spoke to some people, and realised this is way beyond what we want to do. I think had we not fallen off a cliff this season, possibly we would have still gone for Jude Bellingham. But I think Klopp have sat down and go, one guy, and even if this guy is potentially world class, it's not going to solve our problems. So we have to rethink. We have to do something else. And I think, no, I hope that is the case. That we've gone, okay. There's not one guy who's going to come in and solve this, and maybe even that one guy that we wanted, because as you rightly said, last summer when we didn't get the boy that went to Real Madrid, then we decided to sit tight because the right people weren't available, and obviously the right people was Jude Bellingham, isn't it? So I don't know, but also there's an issue with our owners, isn't it, Trevor? Because they obviously it's a self-sustaining business that they run, and they run it along the rules of financial fair play. So unless we change to a different ownership model, we probably have to be honest and say, well, we won't be able to compete with these guys. It needs a massive big rethink, isn't it? So I'm disappointed. I was at Anfield on Sunday against Arsenal, and you spoke about those reliable reporters. I stood and spoke to two of them, and I said to one of them, if you had to put a 10 on who we would sign next year, he said, I'm not a gamble man. He said, but if I had to, I would put money on us getting Jude Bellingham and Mason Mount. That's what he said last Sunday. One of the reliable boys, yeah? Right up there in terms of reliability. And that was still the belief until last Sunday against Arsenal. And as you rightly said, 48 hours later, it's planted by the right names and voices. And here we are. And a lot of people will be extremely difficult because, as you rightly said, we decided not to do anything. I mean, I think the longer all this goes on, Trevor, and I think if you look back, we've been in some difficulties for 12 months now. I even think towards the back end of last season, we sort of ran a little bit on empty. We've had out-of-form fullbacks for a long time. We've had out-of-form centre-halves for a long time. The whole of midfield has been out of form for a long time. They were our glaring weaknesses. And when we had money to spend, we signed a centre-forward and a winger. So I also think that there's mistakes being made within the club in terms of recruitment. So I would like to jump on the back of the owners and say A, B, and C in it, but I just think that we know the way that they do things. They've got their short and long-term planning wrong. They're now trying to rectify that. And I guess Klopp would have been very vocal in that and going, is it Bellingham and no more? If that's the case, I can't do what I want to do just with Bellingham. So we're going back and we're looking at various things, even a story that we've been in touch with N'Golo Kante to see, what a signing he would be, although he would fall into the same category as Thiago in terms of injuries, isn't it? So I find it really difficult, Trevor. I find it really difficult, but I've got some sympathy with the owners because it's pretty open and pretty clear how they run the business, isn't it? Sell to buy, whether we got anyone to sell. But I always think that with the Jude Bellingham thing, I never felt it was going to be the fee. We knew the fee was going to be heavy. I always felt that the bigger problem was going to be the wages. We can pay 100 million for Jude Bellingham over 5 years. It's 20 million a year. We can cope with that, can't we? I always felt that the wages would be a bigger problem than the fee, as it happens now. We've woken up to the fact that one player, as good as he might be, will not improve us to the level that we need to be at, which is pretty straightforward, top four.
Yeah, and you're right, though, going all the way back to the point you made at the start, it's a very public loss. It's a very public humiliation if it doesn't happen. There was so much overt flirting with the fella, so much of the club's own PR stuff, like here's Hendo and Jude looking like pals, here's Trent and Jude looking like pals. It's going to sting, I think, for a lot of people if it doesn't happen. And like you say, it doesn't look likely. There are still one or two people who are firmly of the opinion that it will. There's something that occurred to me in the middle of that I wanted to ask you. We know Jurgen's a sort of famously loyal fella, possibly to an extreme in that people are questioning the wisdom of Jimmy Milner getting another contract. They already question the wisdom of Henderson's, the length of Henderson's contract extension, the fact that Jurgen was going out of his way to get Bobby to stay, and Bobby's the one who's decided to move on. We know these kind of conversations. Do you think that's maybe at the heart of why he doesn't seem as bent out of shape, or ever directs anything but sort of praise towards the ownership group? Because I have no doubt personally that if someone had given John Henry the 4.5 billion that the club was valued at, he'd have taken it and run away, but he didn't get that offer. I think that's why they're still there and majority owners and looking for investment. So I'm wondering, do you think, is that another example? Like, if this is Rafa Benitez, he'd be making all sorts of statements. Tony Conte would be burning the press room down. People have seen this as a little bit of a weakness in Jurgen. Do you hold any truck with that? Do you think that's staffed, or what do you reckon?
I do actually think it's daft. I don't think Klopp has a weakness in that respect. I think they sit down and they have very grown up discussions about how we're going to move forward. And I think by the time they shut the computers down and they're finished with the meetings, I think Klopp is quite happy with what he's heard. I don't think Klopp is one of those who wants A, B, and C, but he wants support. As one of the top managers in the world, he wants support. And I think the owners will go, we've supported him as much as we can over the years. But we hear it more and more. I guess we'll get it again when we have the press conference leading up to the Leeds game, because that'll be the first time that the media will have a chance to ask about Jude Bellingham. And then, of course, Jurgen Klopp will yet again have to defend the owners in public. And yet again, there'll be fans jumping on the back and going, here he goes again, sticking up for the owners. When so many of the fans want FSG out and they've had enough and they don't spend enough money. So it is an issue, isn't it? But Jurgen Klopp's anyone puppet? I'm not having it, Trevor.
Yeah, I'd be in agreement. What do you make then of just this one last thing to do with FSG? As you said, the way they do business is the way they do business, and it's kind of daft to expect anything else from them at this point. I think this is why I can't understand people talking about 200 million war chests in the summer. I mean, where's your evidence of that ever? I think if you look at 16-17, I think that's Jurgen's first full season. I think they make a profit in that window. Overall, the club do. I'm not sure about the following season, but I think there's a small profit or break even. The couple of years where we win the Champions League and the league put together, there's actually a profit made in the transfer across the 4 transfer windows. And I think there's the following season, then there's a big spend of about for FSG of about 120 something million. And then we're back to, breaking even our profits. And I think did they spend total about 20 million last year when you factor in the Luis Diaz deal. It really is operating on buttons when you compare it to the madness that's going on, say, in Stamford Bridge. Nobody's saying that's the right way to do it. Just fire all your money at the wall and hope something sticks. But Jesus, there has to be a happy medium. I think a lot of people have started to turn on this crowd now because they're seeing the primes of several fantastic footballers and they're seeing them feeling like they're wasted. They're seeing trophies getting left behind that should and could have been won. And they're asking questions about squad reinforcement. We're going to look at the midfield in a minute, but just on that issue, do you have a sense of that, when you're talking to people locally there?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, and it's becoming more and more. There's obviously less and less people in the FSG camp. I would say that some of the people I speak to are ill-informed in terms of that. But I fully understand what it's like to be a football fan. And what you do as a football fan, you compare yourself to others. That's just the way we do. We'll look at them. And you mentioned a couple of clubs who've been nowhere near us in the last 5 years. And I'm talking about the likes of Newcastle and Chelsea. And they look at what they spend and they go, well, why can't we? On the back of winning the league or winning the Champions League, and why did we not invest from a position of strength? And I think that's where they went wrong. I mean, you mentioned the new contracts. That those en masse improved contracts that we did with all the players not so long ago, maybe not so wise. But it's easy after, isn't it, Trev? And that's all we got. We talk about things in hindsight, isn't it? So we cheat a little bit, isn't it? But it's without any shadow of a doubt, less and less people supporting the owners and more people thinking it's time to cut your losses. one thing that was floated at me the other day in terms of investment, because we do get the feeling that in an ideal world they want investment. They're quite prepared to maybe let go of 20-25% of the club. And somebody said, well, if they had somebody in place to invest, say 750 million, would they really announce it now? Or would they sit on that news for a little bit longer? It's just a different angle in it, Trev. I generally don't know what to believe. The only thing I trust at the moment is what I see with my own eyes in the games, isn't it? And I look at a team and a squad that's desperately in need of owners who's going to be prepared to spend, what you mentioned before, a minimum of 200 million, which we can't see happening. Where are they going to get that money from? There's no Champions League money either, Trev, and it's all very good saying that won't affect us. It will.
Yeah, I think it's going to definitely affect them and their thinking, even if they haven't shown any great investment on the back of constant Champions League runs. But anyway, that is what it is, and we leave them up on the shelf where they belong at the moment, because there's nothing we can do about that except say, well, what are you going to do? What we can talk about, though, is the squad and how you think it needs to be amended in the summer, because even if it is a case of make do and mend, like sell a raft of players, sell a big star and some others in order to fund new recruits, the new recruits are undeniably needed. You get the impression, don't you, Jan, that if Trent Alexander-Arnold had some really high quality right back breathing down his neck, it would be a different story for the kid, and that's just human nature, and so it goes across the board, especially in midfield. And I want to focus specifically on that midfield with you in a minute, but just let's look at the other areas of the team first. Do you think, and we'll start with defence and goalkeeper, do you think there's something needs doing there? Because I'm thinking, is Caoimhín Kelleher one of our most saleable assets? And if he goes, then we do need someone in. Adrian, I think his contract's up, so we do have Pitaluga and we've got some promising kids, but there's going to have to be someone in there, I would have thought. In my opinion, Joe Gomez might be another saleable asset, but who knows? Maybe Joel Matip. One way or the other, you can see one or both of those perhaps moving on, and of course that frees up wages and so on. Does Costa Simicas stay? If he does, I suppose we're covered there. So for me, I think you're looking at a centre half, a full back. I think we could do it too, because Calvin Ramsey, I don't think really, you can't rely on him suddenly becoming the world beater. We haven't seen play. So I think a centre half and a keeper minimum, and I'd like to see a full back or two. What do you reckon there is realistic, and what would you like to see?
Well, I think I'm pretty much on the same lines as you, Trevor. When we started to watch this team out of form, we didn't think we were ever going to get to the stage where we thought we were going to need reinforcement in defence as well. But yeah, I think Kelleher goes because he needs to play, and also any money we get for him goes straight into our money, isn't it? Because we have no money invested in him. I think the same goes for Nat Phillips. We have to find a buyer for Nat Phillips. Sean Matip, I wouldn't be against selling him either. And it wouldn't surprise me if we bring in two centre halves, one to really challenge the two we got, Konate and Van Dijk. What we do with Joe Gomez is interesting as well. But most likely think we'll probably keep him. I mean, we've been linked with a boy from Frankfurt, Evan Ndika, who I believe is on a free. Looks sort of the right profile, isn't it? But I'm a little bit reluctant with players from the Bundesliga coming to the Premier League, because it's very much 50-50, isn't it? Some do really well and some don't do so well, isn't it? And yeah, a fullback, I absolutely agree. When we are rocking along, Tsimikas could come into that team and really do well. But it's a different team now, isn't it? So Tsimikas is not good enough. We've got no backup for for Trent unless we use Joe Gomez or James Milner. But so yeah, all of a sudden you're looking at 3, possibly 4 goalkeeper defenders, and there's only one way we're going to get them, is by some really smart business, isn't it? You know what I mean? We got to be ahead of the curve here. We got to be out there with those free transfers, and we got to find. But do you think that we have a tendency to surprise people with our picks in terms of the players that we wanted. And I also think that we possibly surprised the selling clubs. You know, when we went to them and go, this is who we want, this is who we want. And I almost think that it's as if the moment Liverpool knock on your door, you just give yourself 5 minutes to think about it, and then you put another 10 million on top. We're finding more and more difficult to pick up those bargains because the clubs are going, Liverpool and their buying strategy has been spot on. We need to wise up to this, isn't it? So, but yeah, 3 or 4, Trevor. 3 or 4 is going to be needed.
So flip it to the far end of the park before we focus on the one area we can all agree needs massive surgery, and look up front. So we know we've got Bobby Firmino on his way out. We have Luis Diaz coming back. We have the evolving thing that is Darwin Núñez. I want to say we almost 100% have Mo Salah, but I have this dark fear in the back of my mind that Mo Salah might be one of the sources of big potential income to fund change. I don't even want to think about that. Do you think we have enough there? Considering we are losing Firmino, who has been a waning force, but still a very important player for us. We've been trying, it looks as if Jurgen's been trying to train Cody Gakpo to do Bobby things. And I think he's been increasingly successful doing them, to be honest. So what's your take there? Do you think there's any surgery required up top, given that we know Firmino is definitely going?
Reluctant to think that we need surgery. But I think when you look, and more in football, we look at stats, isn't it? And we look at the amount of goals that we need from our front guys, because we have a midfield, we have a non-goal scoring midfield. So we've got to find the goals from somewhere. And at the moment, at this rate, we don't have enough goals. And that is just pretty simple. The guys don't score enough goals. Luis Diaz is not a goal scorer. Diego Jota has completely forgotten how to score goals. Núñez, as he rightly says, but we're still unsure about Darwin Núñez. Through the middle, on the left, where do we get the most from him? I think, yes, it would probably require us to play in a different way. But I would prefer Darwin Núñez to be through the middle, because he's closer to goal. He wants to run that way. He wants to stretch the play, isn't it? And I totally agree with Cody Gakpo, and I hear really good things about him. He's really keen. He wants to learn, and he's quite prepared to become that sort of false number 9. But as it stands, without signing any players, I don't think that's a solution. I think we got to settle on, hopefully, Mo on the right, Luis Diaz on the left, and Darwin Núñez through the middle. And we've got to make that work. And then we can get the other two. And the other two will get plenty of games, Trevor. They'll get plenty of games, so they won't be starved of games, isn't it? But that's the way I would like it to see. We can't keep hiding behind. Not sure what to do with Darwin Núñez. We paid a lot of money for him. There's got to be more clarity. This is what he does, isn't it? And I just think that playing wide on the left, he's a bit limited, isn't he? In terms of understanding the role, when to go on the outside, when to come on the inside. He doesn't quite get the signals of other players, isn't it? The way that Bobby dropped and the other two saw the signals straight away and knew where to run. He doesn't have that in his locker. So I very much think that we got to simplify the game for him and play him through the middle and ask him to run in behind the centre halves at every given opportunity.
That's very interesting. It's always interesting to hear specific analysis from you on a player. Do you, like me, is he been a source of joy at least for you in this bad period? Like, he is exciting to watch. You'd have to say that. I know he can drift out of the game for long periods, but he does have something. I'm wondering, do you see a talent that's raw and emerging and has potential to develop there? When you say that he doesn't have that in his locker, do you think that's something that can come, or do you think we need to play to this kid's strengths, which is sort of unpredictability, strength, pace? You'd like to think eventually finishing.
I don't know any other word for it, Trevor, but I don't think he'll ever be a cute footballer. And I don't mean in terms of how he looks, but I don't think he'll ever be a cute footballer. I always think, and it was described very early on in his little career, he's a chaos footballer. And I think he's a chaos footballer. And I think you've got to put him where we can cause the utmost chaos to the opposition. And then we have to live with a little bit of chaos in terms of how we want to play, isn't it? But the one overriding thing with him, Trevor, is that he wants it. And he wants it at Liverpool. for that, there's no doubt whatsoever. I mean, as a footballer, you start out wanting to do a lot of things, isn't it? But I think every footballer wants to retire as a legend, don't they? As a proper legend. And you do get that, don't you? That you can achieve that status at Liverpool, you know what I mean? And I think he's looking. It wouldn't surprise me if he was massive on the history of, what happens at this football club, isn't it? And I just think that the biggest compliment I can pay him at the moment is that he wants to be here and he wants it, and he wants to be successful at our club, because I think he's kind of thinking, this could go to another level for him in terms of popularity. And I think there's nothing wrong with that. Some players just love that, don't they? That adulation. The more they get, the better the players, and whereas others are not that bothered. But I just think he's one of those who goes, I've never come across so many people who's on my side. Everybody wants him to do well, doesn't he? He wins a throw in to sing his name, isn't it? Everybody's desperate, isn't it? And I think he's locked into that. Now, I think Klopp and the backroom staff's got to help him simplify his game.
That's really interesting, and it's one thing for a player to have someone like that in the team with them, and maybe you might love it, maybe you might hate it, maybe it might frustrate you at times. But as a guy who's been on the touchline managing Jan, did you ever have was that an alluring thing for you to have a chaos agent that you can just sort of throw into a match and see what happens, or would that be giving away too much control for you as a manager?
No, absolutely no. I mean, I only ever managed to manage in the lower leagues, and we had all sorts. So substitutes, I always have a belief that substitutes either got to be technically good so they can come straight into the game. They got to have pace if they're not technically good, and then they just got to be that type of people that you throw in, and they'll have an impact on the game. You have no idea what impact, but there'll be an impact. Yeah, this guy goes on now, and I'll guarantee you something will happen. Yeah, I just can't guarantee you what happens. And I think Nunes, obviously, he's a higher level, he's a high class, isn't he? You know what I mean? But I always have this feeling, David Nunes. When you see that Rocky film, and he runs up the steps, and he's at the top of the steps, and you go, I think David Nunes would love to do that through the streets of Liverpool. That's how I look at him.
Yeah.
He would love that. He'd love to run through the streets of Liverpool and go, come with me down to the town hall, and he'd stand up there and go, you all love me. I know you all love me, and I love all of you, Or maybe I'm wrong.
I think you've nailed it, to be honest. I actually want to see that now. So the other area that we have to talk about, obviously, is midfield. Now, I'm going to throw names at you. We've already, I think everybody and their aunt knows that Jude Bellingham would be a perfect fit for a Jurgen Klopp team. He's a wonderful footballer, and he could play one of those number 8 positions brilliantly for us. But we clearly do, like you said earlier on, need a number 6. And there's been so many names thrown around. You mentioned actually N'Golo Kante on loan. That was mentioned. Like you, I mean, I think he's probably one of the best to do it in recent years. Every time I see him, my God, he's just a wonderful footballer. But again, seems quite fragile. I think he's only played, was it 3 games for Chelsea or 4 games for Chelsea, and he's had 3 different managers for those games, or a different manager for each game. So let's look at some of the more recurring names and see what you make of them. And again, you might have 0 to say about some of them and a bit to say about others, but one, apart from Bellingham, that won't go away is Mason Mount. And again, he would be pretty good in one of those attacking roles. I think he would do a decent job, but again, who cares what I think? What do you reckon to Mason Mount, like in terms of likelihood, and would he be suitable for us?
I think a lot of people care what you think, Trevor. I think you want to play your role there. I like Mason Mount. I think Mason Mount is a really good player. I just have one comment I want to make about Jude Bellingham before we move on, Trevor.
Oh yeah, please.
And that is the fact that the one thing that why I was drawn to Jude Bellingham is because I thought he's once in a lifetime footballer. And how often do you get a chance to sign somebody like that? We signed Mason Mount. I can guarantee you that he will be of high international class, yeah? But he will never, ever be able to be amongst the best in the world. There's a limit to what he can achieve. There wasn't any limit with Jude Bellingham, was it? And that was the one thing where I was so reluctant to let it go, because I thought, wouldn't it be wonderful? You know how we love those big stars at Anfield. Isn't it? It's as important as having that figurehead in the dugout. It's that important, you know, whether that was Suarez or Gerrard or whoever it is on that pitch, isn't it? And that was the one thing that always made me think twice about Jude Bellingham because of what he brought. But Mason Mount, I like him. Mason Mount as an 8, two-way, attacking as well as defensive. I think he's a really good player. He's really mobile. He's got a good eye for things. Takes set pieces, scores goals. I'm a big fan of Mason Mount. He'll have 1 year left of his contract. I would find it amazing if they were prepared to let him go, but they'll have their own problems with financial fair play, and they have to find some real money, isn't it? So if somebody's prepared to pay for Mason Mount with 12 months left, if he's available, let's make it a priority, Trevor. I really like the kid.
Now, there's a fee of 70 million being talked about, and I think he's in the last year of his contract. So if Liverpool end up paying 70 million for Mason Mount, you'd have to start really wondering, have the wheels come right off in terms of decision making? But he is a player for sure. You're so right about the idea about Jude Bellingham, by the way, the idea of a generational talent. And there's something about, you know, the idolizing Gerrard and Gerrard with the mutual appreciation. And you just go, oh my God, if we could have a new Gerrard for a decade, you know. But, you know, it is what it is. Who the hell knows what's happening there? So Mason Mount, I'm sensing quite a lot of thumbs up there from you. In regards to some of the other players from the Premier League that are being mentioned, there are a handful here. Moises Caicedo, who I really like and think would be very appropriate for us. Alexis McAllister, who again I think could be very useful for us. Matheus Nunes, who of course we had the opportunity to get before Wolves did, and another lad at Chelsea, Conor Gallagher. So let's take a run at them and see what you make of them. We'll start with Caicedo, and again, just in terms of suitability and how you see him fitting in. Is he a realistic talent?
I was at Old Trafford first game of the season, Man United Brighton, and they'd sold Bissouma to Tottenham. Caicedo's played a couple of games last season, but this was sort of, you know, now you know he's going to play, isn't it? You know, it's different when you look at a player and you think, well, he's only standing in for the couple of games or whatever. But now you know it's for real. They've sold Bissouma. This is the kid who's going to play, isn't it? He was sensational. Absolutely sensational, you know. And what a good player he is, you know, Trevor. Mason Mount for 70 million, not in a million years. I wouldn't entertain that. Caicedo, he's the right age, isn't he? He's the right profile. I'd push the boat a long way to get him. I really like him.
And what about his pal? But by the way, how mad is it that Brighton have two that we're after? You know, the next one we're moving on to is a World Cup winner, Alexis McAllister. Again, could be very useful in a position where we really need someone. What do you think of this kid?
Well, again, I like him. I like him a lot. I think he's improved beyond all recognition. I remember the first time a couple of times I saw him, and he was mainly playing in the Carabao Cup, and I thought, yeah, okay, we've got a technical little player here, probably more of a number 10. We don't use number 10s at Liverpool, so he's never going to be of any interest to us. But he's evolved. He's a really strong number 8. Can also play as a number 6, isn't it? Terrific talent. I wouldn't go down and give Brighton 120 million for the two of them. If I had to choose, I would go for Caicedo, because I think it's a greater need. And if Fabinho listens to this, of course he won't enjoy that, but it does look like we need somebody in there, isn't it? So I would take Caicedo before I take McAllister.
And in terms of the other two, then I mentioned Matheus Nunes and Conor Gallagher. What do you reckon to them as suitable candidates for a Klopp team?
Every time I see Matheus Nunes, he disappoints me. But equally, I see why we're interested in him. You know, you see all these things that just about, but it doesn't quite come off. Just about, but it doesn't quite come off. So I 100% see why we like him. I 100% think that it's a decision based on stats. Yeah, this is what this guy does. But when you look at him and you trust your eyes a little bit and you go, but everything is so close but doesn't quite get there. You know, he's not enough assists, definitely not enough goals, although he scored a wonder goal the other week. But I can 100% see why we want to buy him. And it wouldn't surprise me if we get him. You know, because I think that if we have to go to the owners and back up a signing with stats, I think we'll 100% be able to do that with this kid. So that wouldn't surprise me. Again, fee dependent, 35, 40 million. I think that's a lot of money for what he's achieved so far. But a bit like Diego Jota, when we took it from there, we saw, based on his stats, that there's so much more in the business. So he wouldn't be at the top of my list, no. Absolutely not.
And what about young Gallagher?
Big fan, Trevor.
Really?
Fan.
Really?
Yeah, okay. I'm a big fan of Conor Gallagher. People go, he's had a dreadful season for Chelsea, and I agree. But I think he's put under pressure when he plays for Chelsea because he kind of gets, here's a game, show us what you can get, what you can do. You know, he's never in his comfort zone where he knows that regardless of what I do, I'll play again and again. I know you can't play forever without playing well, but I think this kid needs to know that you're going to get a run of games because he is a high risk footballer. You know, he puts the ball at risk. You know, he wants to pass forward. He wants to dribble. He shoots from distance. You know, so he is a high risk footballer. And I think for him to be able to do that, and also because of his age, he needs to feel the trust from the manager. But I'm a big fan of Conor Gallagher, and I like the fact that we might be talking anything from like 25, 30 million. I think for that, I think he's a really good player, Trevor. You would love him. He's all action. He's physically strong, but he wants to be involved. He wants to run up and down. He wants to, I think he's a big fan. There equally as many people go, he's been absolutely dreadful for Chelsea this season, and he has. But that doesn't shy away from the fact that I'm a big fan.
Love that. Now, there are two other Premier League players that we've been linked with, at least, but we'll just go with the ones that I've seen most stories about. Obviously, Declan Rice is one, but Declan Rice has been linked with everybody. And the other one is João Palhinha at Fulham. Now, I'll openly admit that I think I've seen João Palhinha play 3 times, maybe, in total. So I don't know a lot about this kid. And I say kid, he's going to be 28 in July. Declan Rice, I think, is probably more of the profile. Declan Rice, I've seen quite a bit of a box-to-box merchant. I don't know if he's quite the footballer other people seem to think he is. But then again, I'm very curious to hear what you think about either of them in terms of suitability for Liverpool.
To be honest, I am also a little bit unclear about Declan Rice. I think he does a lot of good things, and the fact that he's a regular in the England team, blah, blah, whatever. But I do think, however, that he needs to step up. If you're going to go in and pay in excess of 60 million and he wants to play for Liverpool, he needs to step up. Has he got an age locker? Probably. But I'm not 100% sure. The other kid, now what a player he is, Trevor. Rafinha at Fulham. And when I saw him early on in the season, and I went, wow. But then I looked and I went, he's the wrong age already, you know. Had that been a 23, 24-year-old kid, you go, wow, all day long, you know what I mean? We talk about Fabinho at his peak, and what he used to get in the way of and what he used to steal and whatever. This kid is absolutely fantastic. It's just a shame, as you rightly said, he's late 20s. They've already paid, I think, close to 30 million for him, so he's going to be expensive, but I like him a lot. I think he's top draw.
Now, as we move away from the Premier League, we're going to be moving away from what a lot of our listeners will have a hell of a lot of familiarity with. But there are names, again, that keep getting mentioned. Kefren Turam's one of them. I know Ugarte is another one. Quadio Kone is another one. And I've heard at least a couple others. I think the kid at Salzburg, Lukas Sukic, and the big one that we've been hearing over the last couple of days is Nicolo Barella from Inter, who's obviously a seriously class act that most people would be familiar with even from international football. So any of those names that jumping out at you as, please let's get that. Well, Gravenberch at Bayern is another one who just continually being linked.
To be fair, go on, Trevor.
No, I was just going to say, any of those like really make your eyes go up on stalks there and go, yeah, let's get that lad.
Yeah, most of them. I think they're really good players. I mean, we wouldn't be linked with them if they're not good. I mean, Gravenberch at Bayern Munich, I'm surprised that we haven't seen more of him. I understand that Joshua Kimmich and Goretzka is ahead of him in the team, isn't it? But I like him. I think he's a good player. You know, again, he's an up and down, he's good mobility. A guard, I don't know, I just think he's a no-brainer. You know, he understands the role, he's physical. We can get him for the right fee. And we do have a tendency, don't we, Trevor, when you look at where do we like to buy from? You know, when you look at the profile of the clubs that we buy from, and you mentioned the kid from Salzburg, isn't it? And Salzburg is definitely one of those clubs that we monitor because of the way that they play. You know, it's a no-brainer, isn't it? So and you had the boy Kone also. He also looks a very, very good player, doesn't he? So you've thrown about 12, 13 names at me, Trevor. I can make a case for all of them. I think they're all really, really good players.
Give me your non-Jude trio. Say you're looking to balance it up with a 6 and 2 8s. What would be your dream combo? Say we're both completely off beam, and FSG decide to fund or either that or fund it through sales like they have before, and we go and we remodel this midfield. What would be the top guys that you'd love to see maybe in a midfield that would actually make sense on its own?
Yeah, I would go for Caicedo at Brighton.
Yeah.
I'd go for Mason Mount at Chelsea. That would obviously leave us a little bit. So when you think about that, would I then be tempted for Gravenberch at Bayern Munich? Because I think A, you might be able to get him on loan, or B, you might be able to get him to price him out the door at a favourable fee. So he'll probably be because I'm not going to be unrealistic and think, well, I can spend another 60, 70, 80 million, because that's not going to be possible, is it? You know, and the only reason that guy is not Conor Gallagher is probably whether Chelsea's going to be prepared to sell two of their most valuable midfield players to us, isn't it? So I'm trying to be as reasonable and sensible. But, you know, based on everything, Nunez, I probably wouldn't mind him seeing him either, because he's one of them, you know, Trev, where you see a player and you go, I want to see more. You know, I'm not satisfied, but I need to see more because I need the question answered. You know, is he what I think he potentially can be? You know what I mean? But he will never ever live up to that potential at Wolves. That's 100% sure. So he needs to go somewhere else. But no, I'm a big fan of Gravenberch. I am surprised. And I think then you got a pretty flexible sort of midfield three that can do a lot of damage. And then you look at what we got to support it, Thiago and Jordan Henderson, whether Fabinho stays or not, isn't it? But we need to be looking at least two midfield players, Trevor, for our starting 11. Otherwise, we're not going to be able to improve.
Yeah, and I know it's a lot to be putting a weight to be putting on a kid's shoulders, but we do have the very, very, very impressive Bajcetic come back into it as well. So that is something that I'm sure Klopp will be counting on or factoring in. And I'm just looking at the clock here, man. We've been just nattering away here about the team, and very little time left to talk about the games coming up. So what we'll do is we'll put that as a subject onto the next show, and we'll look at whatever's remaining at that stage in the wake of having played Leeds on Monday night, I believe. And we'll talk a bit about what that might look like and what we can hope to achieve in the season, because, you know, sitting in 8th, so many points off the pace, I'd be curious. And let's wait, like I say, till we have one more game under our belts to do that chat. And just for the last minute or two, when you look ahead to this game against Leeds and we see where Leeds are sitting, of course, that whole end of the table is very, very tight indeed. They are, I suppose, edging a bit towards safety on 29 points. I mean, a couple of results there at that end of the table and anything can happen. They have actually gone down. What do you reckon in terms of this as a fixture, Jan? We're at their place. Our away form has been pretty wagon. How are you feeling heading into that one? We have got a few players back, I suppose, maybe even Diaz.
Yeah, I mean, you know, instantly the games at Ellen Road, which means we're away from home, that doesn't fill you with any confidence. The other week, Leeds beat Nottingham Forest 2-1 and played quite well. We're all over them. And then they had a dreadful performance against Crystal Palace, where in transition they were dreadful. They just couldn't get themselves organised. And I do think that we're quite capable of hurting them with our running power. And I also think that we're now reaching the stage with Leeds where it's a home game for Leeds, isn't it? So you're looking to pick up points, isn't it? But it's a home game against Liverpool, isn't it? Who have a better team than Leeds. And I think it'll be a really nervous Ellen Road. I think it'll be an end-to-end spectacle. I can't guarantee at what quality, but I think it'll be an exciting game. And I do think that, and we found it ever so difficult, but I think we'll win.
And it's that time, so I might as well ask you a win. You want to give us a feeling for a potential scoreline?
Yeah, I do, Trevor. I think we might beat them 3-1. I just think that there is teams near the bottom who can be difficult to unsettle. They sort of play a very steady game and they're difficult to unsettle. I think Leeds is one of those teams that you can unsettle, and I think that was just, the more chaotic the game can become, I think that suits us at the moment. And I think Leeds are quite, whereas you get other teams who'll take the heat out of the game and time waste and whatever, Leeds is like bang, 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 bang. And I think that will suit us. And for that reason only, as I said before, I think we'll beat them 3-1.
Love it. Love it. I'm looking forward to that one now on the back of your optimism. So we should wrap it up and say, as ever, thanks a million for letting us go through all those various topics. As you said, threw a lot at you there, man, but as ever, you dealt with it admirably. So until we speak again next week, Jan, thanks very much, mate.
Yeah, I guess that will almost be our season, Trevor, from now to the end of the season, is talking about what's going to happen next season, isn't it? Because, this has not been particularly enjoyable, but we keep going.
We'll keep going, and hopefully we will have increasingly more information to be talking about as we move on through these final weeks of the season, and maybe even a few heartening wins and Luis Diaz wonder displays or something. Even if we could get Darwin firing, that would be super. So myself and Jan will be back with you next week, and we'll take you through to the end of the season. Thanks to Jan as always. I've been Trev Downey. We'll see you next week.